Hi, I'm Darren Gough and welcome to my new cricket show. For those of you who don't know me, I used to play a little bit of cricket for Yorkshire, Essex and England. I was a talkSPORT presenter, MD of cricket at Yorkshire, but most people probably know me for being that dancer on Strictly Come Dancing. I played in 4 Ashes series, 2 at home and 2 away, and I never was on the winning side in an Ashes series. I never had that pleasure of lifting that little urn. So what we're going to do, we're going to do 10 shows on how to win an Ashes series, whether it be captaincy, whether it be handling pressure, whether it's dealing with that outside noise from the media, Australian media, English media, or the fans' expectancy, home and away. So what do England need to do to lift that little urn in January at the SCG? This is how to win the Ashes. Welcome to the show, and this is how England are going to win the Ashes. And we're going to start off this week talking about the Aussie press. Right, guys, one thing I want to talk about is the media, right? Media, you go to Australia, media, Australians coming to England. What's your, as you see it, being someone who works in the media and has done for a long, long time and has a huge voice, what do you feel the difference are between the two sets of journalists? Are they similar or are they different?
I mean, I reckon that both countries' journalists look at each other and go, they're cheerleaders. Now, we especially look at the Aussies and think they're cheerleaders.
Definitely, 100%.
Bleed green and gold, get the pom-poms out. They should all be wearing little baggy greens in the press box. We are, I think, a bit more critical of the England team than they are of them. And you were alluding to that earlier. The beloved English press. We like to think we're more objective. But I will say that the best Ashes tour I've ever covered was the 10-11 tour, when it was a great time to be an Englishman in Australia. The Aussies turned in on themselves, didn't they? Yeah. You'd rush to see the papers in the morning because you were wanting to see how their own journalists were slagging off Ricky Ponting or Michael Clarke or whatever. It was a great time. So we don't go in there wanting England to lose, not at all. Every English journalist going out there this winter is praying for an English win. Now, the Aussie press, they can be quite feral. I mean, let's face it. We saw Ben Stokes arriving yesterday, and it's cocky complainer captain, whatever the headline was. Really, and the report began with Kiwi-born Ben Stokes. Little dig there that he's born in New Zealand. Not even English, is he?
Well, they've had a field day with England teams in the past.
Well, that is the taste. That's the West Australian, which is a kind of local tabloid, and they have a bit of fun. That's their chance.
Aren't the old tabloids, though, in Australia? That's the difference. I think with England, you talk about objective, right, and writing balanced pieces in England. That's where I feel. When you go to Australia, when you go over there, you've got like 6 newspapers that are all tabloid.
Yeah, I mean, there's the Melbourne Age, the Sydney Morning Herald, the Australian, which are a bit bigger than tabloid form. But then you get the Courier Mail in Brisbane. I mean, Stuart Broad famously didn't walk at Trent Bridge in 2013. First test, the Gabba, when Darren Lehmann had called for Aussies to send him home in tears, gets a 5 or 6 on the first day, walks in with a copy of the paper and silhouetted him out. They refused to name him. They called him the English medium pacer. And it was just a white shape.
He was genius.
And he loved it. And actually what that did really well, and it was a good lesson for all England cricketers out there, was it diffused the tension because all the Aussie journalists in the room started laughing. They saw that here was a guy who could take it. You know, going into your bunker, looking at it from a journalist perspective, is the worst possible thing that the English guys can do this winter. They are going to get heaps, not just from the crowd, from the press. And how they react to that is going to dictate to, what kind of a tour they're going to have mentally. So it's crucial to handle it well.
Do you think, Matt, one of the reasons, I know it's the scheduling, but although it's been a disaster ODI leg of New Zealand, being out of the way and not being in Australia for, like in our day, we used to go for 3 or 4 warm-up matches and we were knackered before the first test. It's not a bad thing, actually, the guys being in New Zealand and then hopping over to Australia. Although they've hit the ground running, the journalists, by being out of the way and ignoring the build-up and doing it in New Zealand before they go to Australia.
Yeah, I think it can go. I think it can go 2 ways. On one hand, yeah, you're staying out of the way and you're getting your work done. I think the most important thing is the results. So if you are playing games, you want to be winning games because you don't want to give the Aussies any chance of saying, oh, you've just lost the ODIs. Even though the teams are so different now and the formats are so different, it just gives them another little snipe. The other thing I'd say is I always say touring Australia, and unfortunately I've been on both ends of it. Australia is the best tour in the world for an England cricketer as long as you're winning. And it sounds like it's the same for the journalists, right?
I wouldn't know.
I'm telling you now, as long as you're winning, it's the best tour in the world. If you're losing, it very quickly becomes the worst tour in the world, and there is no place you want to be more than away from Australia. So coming up those warm-up games, when we went, we had a number of warm-up games, but we would win the warm-up games. We would turn up and do well, score runs, get wickets. And so there wasn't a lot that the press could do to us. The other thing is it gave us an opportunity actually to settle into the environment of getting the abuse. I remember playing against Western Australia, and there were a handful of guys that basically just turned up to taunt the England cricket team. I don't think they were cricket fans or anything, but they just sat in the crowd for all 3 days or whatever it was and just abused everyone. But that became funny for us. It was something that it was almost like a precursor of what was to come. So we learned to laugh about it, and it gave us an opportunity just to almost acclimatise to what it was going to be like, and then turn it into humour. We also had things like Swanee's Diaries, where I think the same thing with Brody walking in with the courier under his arm. It was sort of people were seeing an insight, and this was again before social media now, where you could show people what you're doing and stuff. Swanee's Diaries, actually looking at it, was genius, because one, it humanised that team rather than putting cricketers on a pedestal. Two, people could see we were laughing at ourselves and taking the mickey out. So whether we liked it or not, Swanee was going to do it. And it kind of, I think people actually kind of warmed to that group, or at least Swanee, Jimmy, and the people involved. So you almost had a bit of a fan bearing because of that, as much as the cricket or anything else. So but having said that, you go there and you get pumped in the first warm-up game, and then you turn up again, because I mean, you guys would have played against an Australia 11 or whatever it was.
Mate, we had 4 first-class matches.
Like,
you remember? I mean, 4 first-class matches, sometimes 5.
Yeah.
94. I think I got 50 first-class wickets that trip. I'm not joking. It was horrendous. I think we had 5 warm-up games, and we went from Tasmania to Brisbane for the first test. So we got proper shafted.
Yeah, and those state teams were strong as well, weren't they? They had proper players in them. You know, there was no sort of easing into
not like in this country where they come over here and we play our second teams against them, which I've never got. I've never got that. Yeah. I'd have wanted to play in those games against Australia and put your name on the map.
Yeah.
But so when it comes to that Aussie Media, when obviously the large, how many guys are going out to Australia generally, English generally? There must be.
I mean,
must be 30.
In the written press, there'll probably be, 12 to 15, smaller than it used to be. Newspaper budgets.
In my day, it used to be probably 30.
Absolutely. Each daily would send 2 or 3, then the Sundays would send a couple. Put the radio and TV guys on top of that. It's a biggish group, so it'll be a travelling circus.
And do you socialise with the opposition journalists?
Oh yeah. We're all.
Is there a bit of bants between?
There was a bit of bants. I remember actually during the 2023 Ashes, the Aussie journos were taking the mick out of Bazball quite a lot, and whenever it looked like one of the England players about to attack, a couple of them would get the klaxon out. They go, Bazball klaxon, do, 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 do. It's that kind of thing. And you think, hang on, they're not. That kind of was quite symbolic, actually, the fact they haven't taken Bazball seriously at all.
And they still have.
They still haven't. We saw that the back page on the West Australian, Dopey Bazball, or something, whatever they call Dozy Bazball. So there will be a bit of tension there. I think, they've always loved to hate the Poms, and Bazball's added an extra level of contempt. I mean, they refused to accept that had it not rained in Manchester in 2023, they might have lost that series, having been 2-0 up. So that has added a bit of pique, and definitely within the press. I'll be fascinated to get out there in the build-up and just see how they're writing about it, because what England need, will shut everyone up, is a good performance in the first test. Absolutely. If they lose that first test, they're in serious trouble. I'll give you a stat. No England team has won a series in Australia after losing the first test since 1954-55. Len Hutton's side.
Brilliant stat. How about the Aussie take? Nobody does loud, brash and opinionated better than Jarrod Kimber, so I asked him. Jarrod, another thing about Australia, right? You've been Australian, again, and working in the media. And we know sometimes how annoying people that work within the media, as we're there with microphones in our hand. And a lot of people complain about the English media, right, when they come over here. But going to Australia, before I give you my thoughts on this, because I've got a lot, what's your thoughts and what goes on in your heads, your Australian media's heads?
I think Australia, I tell you a story that's not about the Ashes. There was 2016, 2017 Australia tour at India, right? And this is when Virat Kohli's becoming the king, right? And Ben Dorries writes an article about Kohli, and he puts it aside in going, Kohli's got like a cult fandom, a little bit like Donald Trump. And so, like, the headline of the newspaper is Kohli is Donald Trump of Indian cricket or something like that. And it's like, and I remember talking to people from Cricket Australia going, how is this going down? Like, this is such a weird thing. They're like, nah, everyone loves it, mate. I love it. This is great. And I was like, oh, yeah, I haven't lived in Australia long enough to remember that this is fine. And I reckon John Norman was there from talkSPORT. We were in the press box, 10, 11 Ashes, and back page of The Age just said KP is I'll blank out the word because John will get really upset. But it was a swear word. And all the English media, one by one's coming up to me, Goughie, going, look what they wrote about KP. And I went, yeah, again, this is pretty standard. This is how Australian papers do it. So I think there's always been a feeling that the 12th man is probably the media and the 13th man is probably the crowd in Australia, and it's very different.
What happened to the umpires? They used to be the 12th man.
Well, they were pretty handy back in the old days.
Oh, mate. 80s and 90s, the umpires were the 12th man.
I would say this, the Pakistani umpires always get a really bad rap. Go and have a look at footage of Australia. Bruce Reid.
I know.
Bruce Reid was a 7-foot left armour, and he got LBWs when it was pitching the outside leg and hitting people in the chest.
Do you remember the game when we had Slater and we had the old screen? Darrell Laird didn't give him out, run out, and he went on to get 100 in Sydney.
He did just review it, right?
We would have won that game. We'd have drawn the series.
I mean, you wouldn't have
won
won
it. We'd have still
obviously.
lost it, but we'd have won the series. We'd have drawn the series, which would have been an absolute miracle for us back in the 90s.
So I do think there is that sort of, there's always the joke that the people at Customs have a go at any cricket team coming through the country. Like,
well, I'll tell you one thing they do. This is where they're clever. So you go to Australia. As soon as you get there, you've done nothing all winter. You get out there in November, season finished in September. As soon as you get to Australia, every other country, straight through, ushered through, take your luggage, boom. Get to Australia, nah. We're going to get every one of your bags and get you to take everything out, and we're going to look at your brand new shoes you've got for an Ashes tour and send them to the cleaners to come and rinse them or whatever, because we haven't worked on a farm, but we played on grass 3 months ago, and they test every shoe, and we stood there for an hour and a half while they cleaned all our boots, and mine were always new when I went on any tour, and we had to sit there. That was the start of it. Then eventually, after an hour and a half waiting to get through, we all go through, and then as soon as you walk through, I actually liked it. But it's like you're a film star. I was like 24, I just started playing for England, and I walked out, and I was like, oh, hang on a minute.
They like the airport scrum, don't they?
Unbelievable. Yeah. And that's when it hit me, but wow, cricket in Australia is pretty big. In England, the media are quite reserved. Would you say that?
Yeah.
Still proper, aren't they? Shirt and tie brigade.
I mean, there's issues, obviously,
the Times
with the tabloids
and the Telegraph and all
but
that.
There's a lot of that sort of stuff. Red trousers and check shirts. Right?
Yeah, exactly. But Australia, totally different.
Yeah. And I think also you've got to understand how Australian media works, right? The different newspapers aren't just fighting kind of like against the English. The Brisbane newspaper wants to be mentioned everywhere else, right? So the Courier Mail, which is like a hyped up Daily Mail, kind of newspaper, they want everyone to be talking about them when the Test match is in Brisbane, right? And when the advertiser in Adelaide wants a similar thing. So the newspapers are fighting each other for this. And, it gets more and more, some of the graphics that are put out on these different players are just bizarre, right? And you see them. And, the most famous one, obviously, is Stuart Broad, who, after the whole thing that happened at Trent Bridge, gets over there. And Darren Lehman's worked all the crowd up and everyone's ready. And the Courier Mail run, I think it was 3 different headlines on him in 3 days. Can you imagine actually having 3 headlines on an overseas cricketer in over here? It just would never happen.
Well, it made him really famous.
It did. It was incredible.
In Australia. And he's now got work in Australia, probably because being the nasty boy for many, many years, didn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, and so, listen, when it comes down to it, all media is actually good media within a kind of, you know what I mean? Without going underground, it's actually not a bad thing. If they're talking about you, it means they're worried about you. That's the way I used to look at Australian media. But one thing they did with us, which I'll never forget, and it came back to haunt them, because just before the Melbourne Test in, was that 98? 98. when we set them 139, we were told we were the worst team to beat. We couldn't bat, we couldn't bowl, we couldn't field. And in fact, they've said that about 3 Ashes squads that have gone over there, haven't they, over the last
They say
20
about almost everything that's losing.
Yeah. Like with us, it was, they've brought over loads of fast bowlers, but they're all rubbish. So we had like Devon Malcolm, Phil De Freitas, myself, Angus Fraser, Joey Benjamin.
Did you have Mullally? Or was that
Mullally, he came in 99. Martin McKay came 94. But I'm sure we might talk about this in another area, but with Martin McKay, he actually was a decent bowler, you know. And I think he just totally, the media got to him. And this is a classic example. The media got to him before the first test. So it had got in his head and it affected his performance. And once he got off, they came at him in that first test in Brisbane, and that was it. It disappeared after that. The media got to him, and then the whole pressure of the situation got to him.
I remember being so every Sydney, it's a bit like London, I suppose. Every Sydney radio station seems to be talkback, right? And every taxi in Sydney has talkback. And I remember getting like a bunch of taxis in Sydney, and 80% of the chat was just about the Ashes, right? Because this was 13-14 Ashes, not going particularly well for England. So just hammering in. And I remember getting a taxi somewhere, getting out of the taxi, and like 2 English players were beside me. And I was like, they probably heard the same thing I just did on a similar kind of thing. And I was like, you don't understand. When you're in England and Australia's doing bad in Ashes, if you don't pick up a newspaper, you don't see it on TV and you don't hear it on the radio. Whereas in Australia, it's 360 degrees, isn't it?
And I agree with that. But the way media's changed now, and we all know now, the modern person, the up-to-date person, my kids, your kids, in fact, everybody's kids, are obsessed by technology. And we're talking iPads, mobile phones. So you cannot get away with it. Instagram, X. So you go on it. As you didn't have to read a paper, you didn't have to read about the headline, how bad you'd bowled, and you'd just gone for 6 and over, and you could easily get away from that by not reading it. Now, I don't think you can, because players are that self-obsessed by going to their rooms and flicking through Instagram and scrolling like that, and on TikTok, you can't avoid it.
But if you've been on social media, even though Australia is a smaller country than England, the amount, like if you write something positive on social media about English cricket, you are always going to find 5 Australians who are going to come on and slag you off, right? If you write something positive about Australian cricket, it's very rare that you get English people doing that. So even on social media, the vitriol and everything else is up. And if you look at like ABC, right, compared to BBC, these are both similar organizations. They're government-run organizations who speak up, you know, who do commentary and do other things within the game. ABC basically do trolling posts about other countries all the time. Have a look. And I work for the ABC. I respect them a lot, but have a look at some of the stuff they put up, and you're like, what are you doing? BBC would not do that. They would, like, you know, they'd faint at the thought of it. So it is very, very different, even within that. And it's just, I suppose the best way of putting it is, I feel it's just louder than anywhere else, right? It's just, it's so loud.
All right. And because it's loud, I think that's one of the reasons the crowds in Australia get a little bit carried away, because they read, or used to read it, now it's seeing it, well, they're reading it, but now it's on a mobile phone or a computer, and they actually think it's normal. And I think we saw in this year's Ryder Cup with the abuse from the fans towards the players. And I think cricket, especially when they go to Australia, is going to be actually like that as well. There's going to be some filth showered at some of our players.
I mean, there always is, right? I think the difference in Australia is, if you look at almost every other cricket nation on earth, they are middle-class driven, right? Even elite driven in some cases, right? For whatever reason, Australian cricket is all classes and almost more working class, right? There was that whole thing in New South Wales that if you were posh, you might not get in the team. Like, you know, I won't say this. There was an Australian legend who was afraid to take his kid to private school because he's like, he might not get into a Shield side.
Well, I've never been posh. I wouldn't know what that is.
But one of the reasons that people like you and Harold Larwood were loved is because you weren't like Atherton and the other guy, really, right? Yeah. Like that's how we see cricket in Australia. So if you go to the MCG, it's got a lot better. Were you and I were probably both at the game when they were throwing golf balls at you guys? Were you at that one?
Yeah, one day international. We went off, didn't we? Yeah.
So I was there at that game.
It's in a 5-iron out of the hospitality box, and we had to go off the pitch, didn't we? And what about when Warren as
He
well.
went out with a helmet on, didn't he?
One, yeah, to come out and calm everyone down, yeah.
Yeah. So if you, especially in the 90s when you played, the MCG was probably more like a football crowd than a cricket crowd, right? It was full on, and I won't go into all the stories because John will
What's it called? Bay what?
Bay 13.
Bay
Bay 13. Well, we used to go there as kids, and we used to count how many people were thrown out before the game started by being drunk, right?
With the melons on the head.
Oh, everything.
What is it? What they put on the head?
That was the friendly bit later on. When I was there, they used to do all the Mexican way.
So you were one of them, right? Is that what you're saying?
I'd like to think I was an innocent bystander.
so you were Bay 15, not Bay 13, right? You were just.
I was
watching.
in the bay, but I wasn't always old enough to drink. Legally.
I reckon he was worse than anyone. I reckon you abused everyone.
I'll tell you that there was a couple of players that I won't go into. I'll tell
Come
you
on,
off mic.
name them. You can now.
But we used to smuggle alcohol in because you couldn't drink at the ground because they stopped alcohol in the ground. Hardcore. You could only have light beer.
What was your trick? How do you sneak it in?
You would put flasks around the inside of your groin and tape them
Really?
up.
Wow, interesting.
But the point being is, there isn't another ground in world cricket that was like that, right? It was so full on. So I think you're right. I think the media plays a part. But honestly, I just think cricket is different in Australia. It is much more like a form of football. And you go to those grounds, and that is the way that it is supported.
Is Sydney the posh one? Is that like a Lord's?
Yeah.
For the crowd? I never felt... When I was at Sydney, I never felt as though we got any rubbish. The Barmy Army in '94, took all that standout on the, I don't even know what it's called, on the left-hand side.
It also has a lot of members, doesn't it? Because it's not that big a ground.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think, I would say that's the posh ground.
Well, okay, so Melbourne was the worst when you played. What's the second worst? Wacker or Gabba?
No, I thought Wacker was all right. Gabba, I would say.
Gabba's
probably,
bad, isn't it? You know the Jonathan Trott story, don't you? Where they spent forever training Jonathan Trott to be like, he's like our rock. We're going to put him on the boundary. Nothing's going to get to him. And he literally spent like an afternoon in the Gabba on the boundary and like almost had a meltdown. Like he couldn't handle it. It's so much abuse. And again, I can't say what they were saying to him because John will cut it out. But it was full on and like. You know, I've talked to players like Ian O'Brien. I think he was one of the first players to come out publicly and just be like, they just called me slurs for like a whole day. Like I've never been around something like that before. This is not how cricket games are in other countries.
But they are funny as well. Aussie. I'll give it some. Now and again they do through other, especially with that slurred accent they do. And it's like with the Tufnell one, and lenders your brain tough as I want to build an idiot. I mean, that still to this day is one of the best ones. Because, I have heard that.
I think people like
firsthand.
But like you and Tuffers, and you can go through players from other countries as well. Also,
we embrace it, though.
I was gonna say,
you could take the mickey out of me, and it's not going to bother me one bit.
But also, I think they do like someone who is a character and is enjoying themselves and everything. So I think that the really interesting players in Australia are generally the kind of the Virat, the Viv, KP type players, you know, incredibly arrogant but really talented. And they sort of hate them a little bit. But then they love people like you and Tuffers and, you know, the more fun cricketers, right? Because they also like that. So it's an interesting culture, but it isn't really like other cricket cultures.
So let's get the expertise of a journalist in Australia who I know from my day, and you definitely know him, Robert Craddock from talkSPORT, to get his views on the Australian media. Now, look, I've been wanting to do this for about 25 years. What is it with you Aussie journalists, as soon as England get off that plane and walk through customs after we've just been searched for 45 minutes to see if our spikes have got dirt on them, we get through customs, we go out there, and the journalists straight away are straight on our back. What is it?
Goughie, we love the theatre of the Ashes. I mean, that lovely spiel of yours probably sums it up. Like it's more than another series. It's the West End. It's Broadway to us, and we love stirring up England and have done for a century or more. And by the same token, when the Aussies land in England, you don't think the sun and the mirror go easy on them either.
Well, listen, we might have one or two journalists. I mean, you guys in Australia, you seem to, I reckon you all have a secret little meeting and say, look, right, we got this team coming here this year. Right, they've got him and him. We're going to absolutely nail them. We're going to pick them, and because if we can get after them, we're going to get after the All England team. Is that the plan?
No, not at all. But I've got to say this, Goughie. What you underestimate is England teams lead with their chin because they generally go so poorly in Australia. I mean, don't worry about not having won a test series in Australia since 2011. England haven't won a test here. So that opens itself up to all sorts of derision. But I will say this. Australia really rates people, England players who tour here, and they get their just desserts. You were one of them. Michael Vaughan was one of them. I mean, his achievements here were richly lauded. So there's a bit of fun. They're stirring the pot. There's old-fashioned jibes, and I used to love this line, Goughie. I used to repeat it. That England's batsmen, they sent out an SOS to Prince Charles to be their latest batsman, and he said, "Look, I'm sorry, I can't bat, but Camilla Parker bowls." I know it's corny, mate,
Hey,
but I loved it.
She'd have got in our team in the 90s, mate, so don't worry about that, because we couldn't bat, ball or field. That were the headlines when we were there in the 90s, wasn't it? I remember when we went there in 94, and we took all these bowlers out there, and I think the headlines were about our bowlers. England think they brought all these pace bowlers out to Australia, and they're all rubbish or something like that. It was along them lines, and it started early, but it didn't help us losing at Lilac Hill, or I think we might have won in the last bowler summit against Dennis, Lilly, and Chappell and a few other oldies. But gone are the days, though, where you've got the build-up like they used to. I think we used to have 4 first-class matches before the first test, but now they're in and straight into the action, so you've got to be prepared before we get on that soil.
Goughie, my first tour of England as a journalist was in 1993, and we were there for 7 weeks before the first test.
Yeah, you loved it, though. 50 US a night, mate. You'd have loved it.
Yeah, and you know, that was incredible. And you know what, Goughie? There is a price to coming late. And I know all the excuses. I know all the reasons. Oh, they're busy schedule. They'll only get here and the team will only play the British Lions in one warm-up game. But you pay a price for that. Perth is a hard wicket to get used to. You will see it in that opening test. You will see English batsmen struggle with bounce that they just haven't acclimatised to. So you do pay a price. You really do.
But, right, come on, be honest with us. Have you got any early digs at the England mate? You've been watching us in New Zealand, obviously. You've just told me now that Smith had just spanked 100 around the... Where is he, at the Gabba? Spanked 100 at the Gabba. So what stories you got lined up for the England players coming over for the Ashes?
Hey, Goughie, it's so funny your call today because just when I got the call to come on your show, I'd literally just hit send on a story, having a real shot at England's bowling tactics, the selection of their team. And I say, I love Mark Wood as a bowler, but I'm sorry, Goughie. And this is what I've said in the story. It's not like the Normandy landing where you can shock and surprise people. His last game of cricket was February 26, and you seriously think he can stand up to the Ashes? I've seen so many of them over the years, these gambles, that they're shrouded in hope and optimism, and 9 out of 10 don't work. And I know there's a bit of, you think I'm joking around here, but I'm not. Mark Wood's last game, February 26. Like, can you imagine? You're a bowler. How will he be feeling after bowling for a day in Perth? He'll be aching, and that's day 1 of 5 tests. So that's my story for tomorrow, and it's just so funny you rang today.
So they've started early then. That's where I would have expected. One thing I will say about the Australian journalists, right, and we do have a chuckle about some of the articles because you are like the 12th man, basically, which is not a bad thing, right? And I totally get it. You're supportive of the team. You want the team to do well. But I'll tell you one thing I found about Australian journalists. If you go down 1-0 quite early, especially now where your captain's gone, you go down 1-0, and I'll tell you what, it'll soon change. You guys will be writing about Australia, saying how they've all over the hill now, they're getting old, and England go 2 up at the Gabba. That'll be it, be all over, won't it?
Listen to you. Look, I've got to say this. There is an open door there for England because the youngest member of Australia's pace attack is Josh Hazlewood at age 34. He's the youngest member of the entire attack. Now, I think that would be unprecedented in history, Goughie. I really do. Now, Australia never used to lose the last test of the summer where I'm standing here at the Gabba. We're unbeaten here for 35 years, but they lost recently against the West Indies last test, and they lost against India, which is sign of an old attack tiring. They have been wonderful, this attack. They are superb, world-leading and outstanding, and one of Australia's best. But no one stays young forever. Father Time taps us all eventually. So there is an open door for Australia. And that's why, if England could have one wish in this series, Goughie, you know what I reckon it would be? To make 380 in their first innings in Perth and have one of the Australian bowlers go, oh, that feels a bit funny, the long session in the field. But there'll be plenty of banter. Oh, don't worry. It'll be flying both ways, I must say. We get on well with the English press, guys who you know well, like Johnny Etheridge and guys like that, Machine Gun Mike Walters. We lived a life with those boys, and when they come up with clever stuff, we say, "Oh, you're too good, boys."
Yeah. Look, you're right, and it's interesting to know that. I think the first test is going to be vital. I think if we get whipped in that first one, it could go all wrong for England. It could be exactly the same as the last few tours there. But I think if we can get off to a flyer and we can get Wood and Archer through one test match and get 2 tests out of Wood, 3 out of Archer in the 5, Archer, I'll be happy. But just on the stuff and the way you go at the English players as soon as they get out there. Do you do that for every team, or is it the theatre of the Ashes that makes it all, and that the love of an Ashes event throughout Australia, and when Australia obviously come to the UK as well?
Yeah, I think that, we don't so much go after them. Is it? Look, it's a bit of playful fun.
Yeah.
Certainly, it's more for England. Certainly, there's more. Let's sort of because the Barmy Harmies here, they got their chance, so it goes back and forth, and I think it's wonderful. And there is a certain style of player who is motivated by it, and I'll give you 2. Faf du Plessis is no one's idea of an outstanding test match champion, but gee, he was good in Australia and he fed off it. He said he almost needed people to rile him. Virat Kohli, example 2. Just love the antagonism of Australia.
Graham
But
Smith.
if you said,
I'll give you Graham Smith.
Absolutely, Smith again, good combative player. But I thought, in terms of an Englishman getting used to it, the best English attitude I've ever seen from a guy over here was Mike Gatting in the mid-1980s, and he won the series as captain. Because they embraced it. They got out, they went to Elton John concerts, Chris Broad and guys like that.
Mate, looking like Henry VIII, he had to embrace it because he was going to get stick throughout, wasn't he, mate?
He was. And he got, he had a nice old tour, Gat, after dark. He loved a quiet beer and good on him. But he absorbed Australia for everything about it, and he loved it, and still looks back for that fondly. But if you hide away in your room, Goughie, and you've seen guys like that intimidated, it barely ever works for you. And why is that the case? I don't know, but I've seen a lot of tourists become meek and bashful and hide away. It's always the teams. Pakistan used to do it right here because guys like Wasim, and he says it himself, he said, I love getting out in Australia, so it's an interesting psychological study, Goughie.
I agree totally with you, and I did too. I mean, I remember, I'll tell you one story. I remember when I first went out on the Ashes, 94, my first tour, and we got out there and I saw all the flashing lights. I'd only just started playing for England, and I thought, wow, I want a bit of this. And if you remember, we used to do a kit launch, and I went to the kit launch, and they come to our team and they said, right, we need one of your players to go on stage. Remember, I'm the newest kid on the block. And none of the senior players would go up on stage because Merv Hughes was up there, and he was a big man, right? I don't know if you've ever seen that picture of me and Merv. I was straight up on stage. Get me up on there, I'll stare him out. And I went up there, and I played along with the drama, We're actors. Yeah. I got up there and I played along with the drama. If he could have put his foot over me, I'd have been like Jack and the Beanstalk, mate. But I was up there and thinking, I'm going to play the part here. I'm not scared of him. I was, but that's all I'm going to show. I'm not scared of him. And I think that helped me to connect with the Australian public, And I think more of our players have got to go and do stuff like that and not be afraid to be seen out and talk to the opposition fans and, because they do. If you show a bit of character, they absolutely adore you.
They do. And they actually, well, here's an example, all right. Kevin Peterson heckled relentlessly when he toured here as an Ashes tourist, returned for the Big Bash, and then said, you know what? It was only when I returned for the Big Bash I sort of got Australia. He said that they secretly sort of rated me, but and that made them taunt me, and there was that. And I think your attitude there, you should actually talk to the team, Goughie, and I mean that. Like, they need to hear those words about how to handle an Australian tour, because I've just seen so many go the other way and become hopelessly intimidated when really it's a lot of hot air, but stand up to Australia, and you're a bit of a mini hero over here. As I said, Michael Vaughan, you saw how well he batted here, and Australia still rates him.
Yeah. Last one as well on that. I think Kevin Peterson, one of the things he does, and he does bag people well. I mean, he bagged Brisbane as a state, didn't he? He said it's an absolute, the pitch rubbish and all this. And actually, I tell you what, they've actually cleaned themselves up. They've spent a bit of money in Brisbane, haven't they? In the city and at the cricket ground. They're going to rebuild it and everything, haven't they? So everything he said is true.
You're right. This ground, the Gabba, where you played before, Goughie, and it's going to be knocked down, and they're going to move to an Olympic stadium for the year 2032. So little old Brisbane is hosting the Olympics. I've lived here for nearly all my life, and I still can't believe it's going to happen. But I remember when you got injured and you flew home from that tour, I went to your press conference, and you had that attitude that you said, that sort of attack and have a bit of fun and that boisterousness. Strangely enough, I can still remember the presser. I still remember you talking, and you flew home with an injury after the test, didn't you? But it was you left behind a lovely legacy, mate. You're still well thought of here.
Big thanks to Jarrod and Craddock from talkSPORT. Let's finish up where we started with Lawrence and Matt. You win in Perth, the second test, day nighter. I think that literally is. Depending on what happens within the game and when you're bowling, when you're batting, the toss of the coin, I think it's so vital, the second one. So if you lose the first one and get on the wrong side of it in the second, you could be 2-0 down, it's job done, It's finished. So the importance of that first test from a player's perspective is going to be massive.
Yeah, I mean, it was something we put, all of our prep was in the first test. And of course, then it was always at the Gabatoir, and you're sort of like, oh my God. And England's record there is horrendous. But in that 2010-11 series, we had that famous 500. I mean, we should have lost that test match. And then Strauss, Trott and Cook just batted for 2.5 days, whatever, with 517 for 1. Suddenly went to Adelaide. I know it's hilarious, still hilarious.
It is.
Suddenly went to Adelaide, almost like we'd won. Because if you can, I would say England, they don't even need to win the first test. They just have to not lose the first test. If you go to the second test match still 0-0, mate, your chances of winning that series go up. They multiply by 10, comfortably. So, and I know that's not the Bazball way, and Stokes.
It happened with my day. We got away with Brisbane with a thunderstorm, which was for 2 days. Yeah. And we got away with a draw. We still lost 3-0, I think. I can't remember what exactly, but it's going to be fine. How long do you think before the Aussie media change? Because you've seen that. 2010-11, talked about it. If they lose that first test, do you think it'll change quickly?
Yeah, I think
especially
it might.
without Cummins being in the side.
Well, I think Cummins is crucial actually, because as long as he's coming back for the second test.
Yeah, I don't think he is.
Well, let's just say he does, hypothetically. That will give them something to cling on to if they lose the first test. If he comes back and Australia, let's dream here, 2-0 down after 2, then they will absolutely turn on them. They will not want to lose to this England side who they regard as sort of cocky and spoiled and arrogant, especially after the reaction to the Johnny Bairstow stumping at Lords in 2023 and the talk about the spirit of cricket. That really got up their noses. They will happily turn on them. They're very good supporters, but they're also strong critics. And that is the dream scenario for England, that all the attention goes towards the home side after the first test. Now, the Aussie press like to kind of leap on a theme. So it could well be, if England lose the first test, they'll be like, how much golf did you play before it? I remember the 2016-17 tour, I think it was. There was a big thing about England drinking a lot, which made it no different from any other Ashes tour as far as I could tell. But Moeen Ali was asked about drinking by one of the local journalists. Said, do you guys ever stay at a pub? And he had to point out that he was a teetotaler, so that kind of sucked the sort of power from that question. But they will leap on anything. They'll look for reasons why England aren't good. They will ridicule them, and it will need strong leadership. It will be cutting out the external noise, which is a big thing for Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes. And convincing them that all that matters is the view of the captain, the coach, the guys together, and go out there and have some fun. It is the chance of a lifetime, as you're saying. It is a great place.
Yeah.
It's a great place to be a reporter. It's just a brilliant country to tour. It's much better when you're winning.
What about the pressure from you for getting pieces? I mean, would you have to write during a test match one piece a day?
Oh, I wish. That would be nice. I know.
What, more than one a day?
Well, you think about the deadline.
Slave labour, isn't it?
Oh, slave labour. We work back twice as much as our contract demands in Australia. And so at the end of a day's play, you're filing a match report straight away for the web, so that people in England are waking up and can, over their cornflakes, can read what happened. You're then kind of going back to your hotel room and writing a more considered piece for the next day's paper. But bear in mind, by the time that newspaper comes out in England, the next day will have happened in Australia. So you're writing about day one in Australia, and day two will have happened by the time people pick up the physical paper. So you can't say things like England took control of the first test, because by the time it's read, they could have collapsed to 50 all out next day. So you're having to think of a piece that kind of survives the passage of time. If Joe Root scores his first 100 in Australia, for example, you might write a piece about how he's finally crossed the Rubicon, the final thing's been ticked off. So you're going live for the web and then more thinky for the newspaper. And then there'll be news stories that will break throughout the day. You know, the Aussie press will be trying to get news stories all the time. You have to follow one of those.
There will be.
There will be stuff. There'll be someone does something stupid off the field or whatever.
They came up with the one with the Johnny Bairstow one that was like
the headbutt.
The headbutt, which was mad, wasn't it? I mean, that was the maddest bit of journalism I think I've ever read. It was totally untrue, wasn't it?
Well, word had got out that he'd greeted Cameron Bancroft with what they were describing as a
Barnsley
rugby
kiss.
League Northern.
Well, yeah, Barnsley kiss.
You do it all the time, don't you?
Yeah,
Did
Barnsley kiss. Yeah.
Just before I came on here. But the word got out to one of the Aussie journos through, I think David Warner had slipped it.
Oh, he's all coming from him.
Who would have thought it? And they absolutely hammered Bairstow about it, and it became a story. And then Bairstow got put up the press, and then Bancroft and Smith were there laughing away afterwards, talking. You know, it was a PR disaster for England. Not only they'd lost the test by 10 wickets, they're now dealing with the fact that one of their players had headbutted an opponent before the game had started. Like, if they can avoid that kind of scenario, that would be quite useful.
Hiya, Gough here. This week's show is the Aussie Media.
Tell me what your views of the Johnny Bairstow Barnsley kiss incident was.
I think over the last couple of years, we've definitely seen more stories about the off-field stuff, right? And look, you know Australia pretty well. It doesn't have as many. It doesn't. Most of the newspapers are tabloids, right? And you've got all these talkback stations as well.
So they're after headlines, right?
Yeah. So I think, you know, there was one years ago about Ishant Sharma leaving the Gabba because he didn't like the quality of the food, right? And that was like talking point for days.
Oh, I loved it. They couldn't get me out.
And so I think there's been a real move towards those sorts of things. Eventually, we find out that story is kind of nonsense, right? But for a couple of days, it helps all the talkback stations, all the TV channels run with it, all the newspapers have it. All the social media has it. That's what they want, right? And I think that's the kind of social media that Australia has. It's a bit of a bubble, right? What happens outside of Australia doesn't always get reported in Australia. So anything that happens in Australia is supersized. And I think having something like that occur, you see it with the Aussie rules footballers and the rugby players, right? Anything that happens off the field is reported even more than maybe it is for the football players over here because it's such a small bubble.
And especially back in the day, listen, guys used to go out and drink a lot more than they do now. I mean, and we've seen now with the power of social media, but players are absolutely scared to death now to go out in the groups like they used to do many, many years ago. So they have become a bit of a bunker, hasn't it? It's become a bit of a closed doors, and the only time they go out now is when they're probably after a test match, when they win a test match especially. But what about that Johnny Bairstow one? I can't even remember when it was. Was it before the series started?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it was, yeah.
I think it was. Was it in Perth in a warm-up game or
but
something?
Also, I know this is when like English people don't always understand Australia because, you know, the Ashes, they're so far away, and if you haven't been there. You've been to Perth. There aren't a lot of famous people in Perth. So when Johnny Bairstow...
It's pretty quiet though, isn't it?
Yeah. So when... it's hard. It's actually hard to headbutt anyone in Perth. There's almost no one there. Yeah. But there aren't a lot of famous people in Perth, right? Whereas you know, in the UK at any one time, there's famous people everywhere. There's bands coming through, there's actors coming through, and everything else. In Perth, they named a freeway after an Aussie rules footballer, right? Like, they don't have a lot of celebrities go through that place, right? So when
it's not like Canada when they have a Tim Hortons or something like that, yeah.
But so from that perspective, when Bairstow is there, he's one of the most famous people in Perth at that time. There aren't that many
Johnny lad.
There aren't that many times.
And he's recognisable. That's the biggest thing. Having red hair and being as recognisable as Johnny Bairstow, there is no hiding place. It's not like me or you could just fit in anywhere and nobody would have a clue. And I always say that about... The good thing about me, I look normal, right? Do you know what I mean by that? I'm not tall. Normal? I'm just normal height. And I look normal.
I've never met another person who looks like you.
No, but what I mean, like somebody like Kevin Peterson, he can't hide anywhere. He's 6'5", right? He stands out. Stuart Broad, 6'4" or 5", stands out. Johnny Bairstow stands out more than anybody. And Stokes is another classic example. Where's he going to hide?
But to go back to your point from before as well, when Bairstow gets to Perth, and you're watching the news that night, or you're reading a newspaper, or in your social media, he's coming through the airport, right? It's a story that the England team has landed in Perth. So again, as you say, he's a recognisable person because of the hair, but normal people in Perth will have seen him. Whereas, let's be honest, let's say you go to Nottingham, which is probably a much smaller place than Perth. There's no big news stories right across Nottingham that the Australian players are there or anything like that. So it's a completely different society. And so Johnny Bairstow is probably more famous in Perth for the week that he's there, when he's in a nightclub or not, than he is most times in the UK.
And in Australia, cricket is bigger than it is in this country. Yeah. Whether people like it or not, it is, and it's their kind of main sport.
So 2 months of the year, it's massive.
But
right?
I agree with you. The one thing I do like about the Australian media is, but they love their team, and they are the 12th man, the 13th man, right? And we've seen that. They as soon as that England turn up to Perth, they're going to be nailing every single player. Joe Root for not scoring 100. Ben Stokes, let's see how Bazball works in this country against our bowlers. We're going to see it all over. But I'll tell you what, if England get off to a flyer and they win that first test, we all know the Australian media are going to turn the next day and say, we need Cummins back ASAP. Steve Smith shouldn't be captain. This is the worst Australian team. Stuart Broad was right. They've gone. It's time to rebuild. What's your thoughts on that?
Australia won the we get all the numbers wrong, but the 2021 World Cup, right? They won in Dubai. They came back in 2022 and hosted it and bombed out, right? And the Australian media were like, they're soft, they're not real men, they're snowflakes, they're too woke now. And I was like, they just won a World Cup, guys. Like, they just won a World Cup. But my favourite one is 2010-11 Ashes, when Michael Clarke gets booed in Melbourne. And you're like, fair enough. Like, he's not particularly liked in Victoria. Like, I can understand it. And as we said before, Melbourne crowds are Melbourne crowds. Then he gets to Sydney, where he's from, Goughie. And not only does he get booed in Sydney, but the newspapers all turn on him and call him, you know, the worst captain, the worst player, the worst person they've ever met. They're talking about his personality. Like, the Australian press, when it turns on the Australian team, is as vicious as they are on the English team. Like, there's no hiding. If they're not playing well, it would go that way. So if you can win a couple of early tests, and if you go back to 10-11, you have the draw in Brisbane where they do really, really well at the end, right, with that huge partnership. And then they win in Adelaide. The Australian press they just turned. Even when Australia went 1-1 at the WACA, they're like, no, you shouldn't be 1-1.
I was at the WACA. I went to the WACA.
Yeah, you went to that test.
Yeah, I went to that test.
So, they were full on.
I wasn't playing.
Yeah, no, you didn't get a game. You're unlucky. But they obviously, by the end of that series, they completely turned. So you can actually use the Australian press against them, right? And it's a bit like, it's like when you play in India. What do you try and do in India? You try and make the crowd go silent. Because to an Indian player, if the crowd is silent, that's the worst noise. Well,
in India, you have to win the toss.
Okay, you win the toss, and then you make them silent.
If you win the toss, you've got 50% chance of winning the game.
But you know what I mean?
So if you don't win the toss, you've got about 20% chance of winning the game against India in India. Yeah.
But in Australia, I think really it is a big part of if you can win over the media. And Bazball's a big chance of that. Most people.
So how are we going to do that? Because the only way we're going to do that is winning Perth, right? That's it. That's the only way that's going to happen. Because now the excuses are there. No Cummins going to be injured. We all knew that. I mean, Cummins, I said it at the Cricket Writers thing the other day. All you people keep talking about, Cummins ain't playing. He ain't playing. It wouldn't surprise me if he didn't play. If he's not, I can't see him playing till the third test. And then if Australia are 2-0 up, I don't think they'll play him in the third test. So he might not play the whole series. So they're already, the excuses are in. Khawaja, 39 years old, his last few test matches he's not really delivered to what he wants to do. Stark looks as though he's still red hot, by the way.
Stark's
I think
come back into form, but Head's not in great form at the moment.
Yeah.
Like, there's many questions in that side.
Well, there is this Green. Is he a number 3 or is he a better number 6? Bo Webster, is he good enough to be an Australian cricketer? There is so many question marks at the moment. So I'm really looking forward to the Australian media nailing Australia this winter.
I'll tell you what, I can tell you exactly what the headlines will be. Old man Aussies done. Because that's what it's going to be. It's just going to be about how old they are, right?
We'll leave it at that.